To create a test or quiz in your Niihka course site, head to the Test and Quizzes tool in the site that you're creating the test for. Once you click on that tool, you're taken to a page that shows you all the assessments that have already been created, if you have any. And it breaks it up into three different categories. You have pending assessments, which are ones that you've created but not yet released for students. You have published assessments, and within published you have two other subcategories. Active are the ones that are currently released for students to be taking, and then you have inactive are the ones that were released at one point or another but are no longer. Either you have them set for date restricted access and you've past that point, or you've told it to publish it but not until a certain point. So maybe you've created this quiz and you want it to be released effective next week. That would fall under the inactive assessment, and then once that date comes around, it would automatically be moved into the active assessments. But for right now, we don't have any tests or quizzes created, so up at the top you can see new assessments, and we're going to create an assessment. I'm going to call this a Unit 1 quiz. And you do have two options here, either use Assessment Builder or using markup text. For this example, I'm going to use the Assessment Builder because it's easier to use. It allows you to go one at a time. The markup text I'll cover in another video, but that allows you to basically create your assessment in Microsoft Word, which a lot of instructors are currently doing. It shows you the correct formatting for the questions so that you can copy and paste them into Niihka without having to do a whole lot of extra work. You do have several other options under the Choose Assessment Type. This is an optional field that we usually recommend you leave blank. Just leave it at Select. If you choose Formative Assessment, Problem Set, Survey, Test, or Time Test, even if you do want it to be a timed test, we recommend not selecting that here. These are some presets that come with the Test and Quizzes tool that actually restrict you from being able to do some other things. So in another video we'll cover all of the possible settings that you can choose when you choose to deploy this quiz, but for right now go ahead and leave it at Select and then click Create. So now this is where we can add the different questions that we want to include. Under Part 1 here you can have several different parts, but insert new question. I'm going to choose a multiple choice question, and under answer point value I'm going to give this 1 point. And if a student gets it wrong, do you want Niihka to automatically deduct points from their total grade? Most of the time I would assume you'd want this to be 0, but you can opt to have a negative point value for incorrect answers. So under the question text, I'm going to say, do you understand Unit 1? And you can also add attachments if you'd like to do so. There are a couple of different answers. There's going to be yes or no, and the correct answer is going to be A. We want students to understand this, so that's going to be the correct answer. Do you want to randomize the answers? So do you want no to come before A in for some of the students to help cut down on the cheating? You also have the ability to assign this to a specific part. I mentioned that you can do different parts where, part 1 could be all of your multiple choice questions, and part 2 could be all of your short answer questions, or your parts could be set up by subunit. So this is the Unit 1 quiz. Part 1 could be Chapter 1. Part 2 could be Chapter 2, and have, I don't know, 3 or 4 different parts within a specific unit. You can also add this question to a question pool. So if you want to save this question and be able to reuse it later on in another quiz, such as the midterm or the final exam, you can assign this to a question pool and choose the pool. You do have to have the pool already created in order for this option to work. You can also provide feedback to students if they get the answer correct or incorrect. And once you're done with that, click on Save. So after you've done all of those, you're taken back to the screen where you can see question 1 is, do you understand Unit 1? And you can go through and continue adding questions through this drop-down menu, as many different questions as you want. If you want to add a part, for example, there's a link up here that says Add Part. And so for this, I can call this Part 2. I can add attachments. I also have some additional options here. Whether or not you want to enter the questions one by one like we have been doing. or if you want to do a random draw from a question pool. This allows you to create a quiz that pulls questions from a question pool that you've already created into this quiz. So you don't have to duplicate the your work. So if I choose yes, randomly draw these questions, I'm going to select the question pool. So I'm going to choose quiz 1. And how many questions do you want to pull from that quiz 1 pool? So in the parentheses here, you can see it says the numerical value shows you how many questions are currently in that pool. So I'm just going to say pull 1 question, but if you've got 50 questions, you can tell it to pull 10. The point value of the questions is optional. When you enter questions into a question pool, you do set a default value. So if you don't put anything in this box, it will use that default value. You can also do negative point values. Again, this is optional, and it overrides what you previously entered in the question pool. And type of randomization. So you can choose a student's questions are randomized each time an assessment is submitted, or a student's questions are randomized once for all submissions. The first option gives you a little bit more flexibility when it comes to, or not flexibility, but a little bit more security when it comes to cheating. So we encourage you to keep that as the default option. Once you're done with that, you can click on Save, and you'll see that we now have a part 2 here, and you have a note that says the questions for this part were generated from the question pool Unit 1 quiz on this timestamp. An important thing to keep in mind with this is, let's say I were to set this to pull the questions from the Unit 1 quiz, but then I added 10 questions to the quiz. Well, it's not going to include those 10 questions in the randomization because they were added to the question pool after this was set up. So in order to have this randomization pull those 10 questions, you do have to click the Update Questions button here to update this assessment to pull the latest version of the questions. And that is how you create an assessment using the Tests and Quizzes tool.